A shot rang out across the Wyoming mountains. Jack Morgan never missed. The body of a massive elk tumbled down the snowy slope, steam rising from where the bullet had found its mark. A clean kill from over 300 yards. Jack lowered his Winchester, working the lever with practiced precision, the spent brass shell arcing through the frigid morning air. But as he turned toward his cabin, a new sound cut the silence. Boots crunching on snow. Not animal, human. Jack's hand moved to his holstered Colt, eyes narrowing as he scanned the tree line. Three men emerged from the pines, rifles raised, advancing on his cabin with the unmistakable intent of men who've come to kill. Jack's first shot caught the leader square in the chest before the man could even register the mountain man's presence. The second dropped his companion with a bullet through the throat. The third managed to fire once, wildly, before Jack's third shot silenced him forever. Red blood spread across pristine white snow as Jack approached the bodies, his breath clouding in the bitter cold. That's when he saw her. High on the cabin's roof, a woman hung by her bound wrist from the ridge beam, blonde hair matted with blood, feet dangling lifelessly above the door. Below her, burned deep into the weathered wood of his door, one word. Traitor! The smell of charred wood stung his nostrils as Jack moved closer. The woman's chest rose and fell in shallow, uneven breaths. Not dead, but dying. As Jack cut her down, cradling her broken body against his chest, a volley of distant gunfire shattered the mountain silence. More were coming. Jack Morgan had spent 7 years hiding from the world on this mountain, but the world had just found him anyway. And this was about to become the bloodiest battle of his life. Hold on, Jack muttered, his voice rough from disuse as he carried the unconscious woman across the threshold of his cabin. He laid her carefully on his bed, quickly assessing her injuries. Her face was bruised, lips split, but it was her back that made his jaw clench tight. Through the torn fabric of her dress, he could see the crisscross pattern of whip marks, some fresh and bleeding, others partially healed. Burns, too. Deliberate circular marks that could only have been made by the glowing end of a cigar. These weren't wounds from falling. These were torture. Jack grabbed his medical kit, supplies left over from his army days. As he cleaned her wounds with whiskey and water, his mind flashed back to another time, another place, field hospitals during the Civil War, the sounds of men screaming, the smell of gangrene and death. He shook away the memories, focusing on the task at hand. Outside, the gunfire had stopped, but that didn't mean they were safe. Whoever had strung this woman up would be coming back to finish the job. Jack moved to the gun rack mounted on his wall, his fingers traced over the Winchester he'd just used for hunting. Next to it hung an old Colt Army revolver, untouched for years, its blued steel dulled with time, but not with rust. He'd kept it clean, though he'd sworn never to use it on a man again. Some promises were meant to be broken. He loaded all 6 chambers. Feeling the weight settle in his hand like greeting an old friend you'd hoped never to see again. He checked the action, smooth as the day he'd last fired it. Some skills never leave a man, no matter how hard he tries to forget them. Jack Morgan hadn't always lived alone on this mountain. Once, he'd been Lieutenant Jack Morgan of the 8th Cavalry, the youngest sharpshooter in his unit, with 27 confirmed kills before his 25th birthday. The long scar that ran from his right eye down to his jaw wasn't what made men lower their gaze when they passed him. It was his eyes, cold and empty as a winter sky, eyes that had seen too much death to fear it anymore. After the war, Jack had tried to build a life away from the killing. He'd married Sarah, a schoolteacher from Boston, who traveled west with dreams bigger than the territory itself. They'd had a son, little Thomas, with his mother's gentle eyes and his father's stubborn chin. For 3 years, they'd lived on a small plot of land near the border settlements. Jack had thought maybe, just maybe, he could bury the soldier and become a farmer. Then came that cursed winter night when the so-called border guard rode in. Self-appointed protectors of white civilization, they claimed, though all Jack saw were drunken cowards with torches. While Jack was away trading furs, they'd raided the mixed settlement where Sarah had been teaching reading to local children. No survivors, no mercy. When Jack returned, he found only ashes, two graves to dig, and tracks leading west. He'd followed those tracks for 2 years before the trail went cold. By then, something inside him had frozen over, harder than Wyoming granite in January. That's how Jack Morgan ended up in this abandoned military station turned cabin, high in the mountains where the wind spoke more often than he did. 7 years now, with only his rifle for company, a Winchester for hunting, and the old Cold Army revolver he kept but rarely touched. A reminder of what he'd been, what he'd lost. Jack knew how to survive up here better than most wolves. He could read the sky for tomorrow's weather, track elk through 3 feet of snow, and set traps that never came up empty. He'd built his cabin stronger than most men built their lives. Sturdy logs chinked with clay and moss, a stone chimney that drew smoke clean even in the worst storms, and a root cellar stocked to outlast any winter. A soft moan from the bed pulled Jack from his thoughts. The woman was stirring, her face contorted in pain or perhaps a nightmare. He approached cautiously, keeping the Colt within reach. Her eyes flew open, startling blue against her dirt-streaked face. For a moment, there was only confusion, then recognition of danger. She let out a strangled cry, scrambling backward on the bed, her hands clawing at invisible restraints. "Get away from me!" she screamed, her voice raw. "I'll die before you take me back." Jack raised his hands, showing he meant no harm. "You're safe," he said, voice low and steady. "You're not there anymore." She didn't believe him. Her eyes darted around the cabin, searching for escape. Then she spotted the fire poker and lunged for it. Jack moved faster than a man his size should be able to, catching her around the waist and pulling her back. "Don't," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Not like this. Not when you've made it this far." The fight drained from her suddenly. She sagged against him, trembling, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "Who are you?" she finally asked, her voice cracked and dry. "Name's Jack. Jack Morgan. This is my place." "You found me?" He nodded once. "Why'd you cut me down?" There was suspicion in her voice, as if kindness had become something foreign to her. Jack's answer was simple. "Same reason I breathe. Never really considered doing otherwise." She studied him for a long moment, then sank to the floor, arms wrapped around herself like she was holding broken pieces together. After a long silence, she spoke again. "My name is Elizabeth Reed." Jack offered her water, which she drank greedily. He didn't press for more, just added wood to the fire and waited. When she finally spoke again, her voice was stronger. "How many did you kill outside?" "3," Jack replied without emotion. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. "Good, that's a start." Night settled over the mountain like a heavy blanket. Jack sat by the fire, cleaning his guns, while Elizabeth slept fitfully on his bed. The cabin was quiet except for the occasional pop from the fire and the wind whistling through the pines outside. The 3 dead men lay stiff in the root cellar. He'd search them properly in the morning for anything useful, then bury them deep where scavengers couldn't dig them up. Near midnight, Elizabeth woke fully. She sat up slowly, wincing at the pain from her wounds, and joined Jack by the fire. Neither spoke for a while, both watching the flames dance. "I should tell you why they want me dead," she finally said. Jack glanced at her. "Only if you want to." "I need to, because they'll keep coming." She wrapped herself tighter in the blanket he'd given her. "And you deserve to know what you've stepped into." Elizabeth Reed was the only daughter of Samuel Reed, owner of the largest cattle operation in Silverstone and member of the town council. She'd been raised in privilege, expected to marry well and uphold the family name. But Elizabeth had always been different, headstrong, questioning, unwilling to accept the boundaries others set for her. Last spring, she said, eyes fixed on the fire, I was thrown from my horse while riding alone. Broke my arm, hit my head. I would have died there if Thomas hadn't found me. Thomas, Jack asked. Thomas Gray Wolf. Her voice softened. He was a Cherokee healer, came to our territory selling remedies and medicines. He saved my life that day, set my arm, stopped the bleeding. Jack didn't need to hear the rest to know where this was headed, but he let her continue. I started meeting him in secret. He taught me about plants, healing, things my father would call savage superstition. But Thomas knew more about this land, about life, than anyone I'd ever met. Her voice broke. We fell in love. We were going to leave, head to California where no one would know us or care who we were. Your father found out, Jack said. It wasn't a question. Elizabeth nodded, a tear sliding down her cheek. Someone saw us together, told my father. He called in Nathaniel Bishop and his border guard. Jack's hand stilled on his gun at the name. They came for us while we were preparing to leave. Thomas tried to protect me. Her voice failed her. I saw him fall. They put 3 bullets in him before he could even reach his knife. And they took you, Jack said. Elizabeth pulled up her sleeve, revealing the rope burns around her wrist. They dragged me back to town. Bishop called me a race traitor, said I had to be an example. She swallowed hard. They tied me to a post in the town square. Bishop himself used the whip. 20 lashes, 1 for each year I'd wasted being alive, he said. Jack's hands had balled into fists without him realizing it. After that, they took me from town to town, a warning to other white women who might love someone with darker skin. She looked up, her eyes hollow. Last night, they brought me up here, said the mountain would finish what they started. Elizabeth fell silent, exhausted by the telling. After a moment, she looked directly at Jack. You can hate me too. Everyone else does. Jack met her gaze steadily. I don't hate you. You think I betrayed my race? She challenged, a spark of defiance returning. No, he said simply. I think the ones who say that never knew what love looked like. Her eyes welled with fresh tears. I should have died with him. Jack rose and stoked the fire, his back to her. You didn't. And that ain't betrayal. That's survival. He turned to face her. Only cowards fear a soul brave enough to love across a line. Elizabeth lowered her face to her hands and wept, not the controlled, quiet tears of a lady, but the raw, racking sobs of someone who'd held her grief too tightly for too long. Later, as she drifted back to sleep on Jack's bed, she spotted the Colt revolver on the table. Her hand reached out, fingers brushing the worn handle. Will you help me kill them? She asked, voice clear, despite her exhaustion. Jack's reply was cold as the mountain air outside. Get some rest. We've got killing to do come morning. Dawn broke gray and threatening, heavy clouds promising snow by afternoon. Jack had spent the night in his chair, the Colt on his knee, listening to every sound the mountain made. Now he stood at his window, watching the tree line, waiting. Who is Nathaniel Bishop? He asked without turning, sensing Elizabeth behind him. She paused, surprised by the question. Leader of the border guard, ex-military, I think. He showed up in our territory about 3 years ago, started recruiting men, saying they needed to protect what was theirs. My father thought he was a godsend. Your father was a fool, Jack said flatly. Elizabeth didn't argue. Bishop's men. How many? 12, maybe 15 that I've seen, all armed. They wear black bandanas with red borders. Jack nodded. He knew the type. Men who needed a cause to justify their natural cruelty. How'd you know his name? Elizabeth asked suddenly. I don't remember mentioning it last night. Jack was silent so long she thought he might not answer. Finally, he turned to face her. 8 years ago, I had a wife named Sarah and a son named Thomas. His voice was mechanical, as if reading from a ledger. They died in a raid on a mixed settlement near the border. The raid was led by a militia captain named Nathaniel Bishop. Understanding dawned in Elizabeth's eyes. You've been hunting him. I was. Then the trail went cold, and I decided dying up here was easier than living down there. He glanced at the door with its burned message. Seems the mountain had other ideas. A sound outside, the soft crunch of snow under a cautious boot, made them both freeze. Jack motioned Elizabeth back, away from the window. He moved to the side of the door, Colt raised, listening. 3 men he guessed from the footsteps, spreading out, trying to surround the cabin. Amateur move. The cabin had only 2 windows and 1 door, and the rear butted up against steep rock. There was nowhere to go but through the front. When I tell you, get under the bed, he whispered to Elizabeth. She nodded, eyes wide but steady. The first shot came through the window, shattering the silence. Jack pushed Elizabeth down as glass exploded across the room. Then came a voice, rough with false confidence. We know you're in there, Morgan. The woman belongs to Bishop. Hand her over, and maybe we don't burn you out. Jack didn't respond. He counted silently. 1 man at the window, 1 by the woodpile to the right, judging by where the voice came from. The third would be. The door burst open, kicked hard from outside. Jack fired twice as the man charged in. The first shot took him in the chest, the second in the throat as he fell. The Colt's roar filled the small cabin, deafening them both. The man by the woodpile started firing wildly through the broken window. Jack rolled across the floor, came up on 1 knee, and put a bullet through the man's shoulder. He heard a scream, then the satisfying thud of a body hitting snow. Now, he shouted to Elizabeth. She scrambled under the bed as the third man rushed the door, firing as he came. Jack felt the burn as a bullet grazed his arm, but his return shot was better placed. The man dropped his gun, clutching his stomach, and staggered backward into the yard. Jack was on him in seconds, dragging him back inside the cabin. Who sent you? Jack demanded, though he already knew. The man coughed, blood bubbling at his lips. B. Bishop. Said to bring the woman. Said you'd be easy. Old man living alone. He laughed, a wet, terrible sound. Didn't say nothing about you being Jack fucking Morgan. Where is he? Coming, with all the boys. Said if we didn't bring her by sundown, he'd come himself. The man's eyes were growing glassy. You're dead, Morgan. Both of you. Dead as... He never finished. Jack checked the other 2 men. Both dead. He'd taken down 3 men with 4 shots. His hands hadn't forgotten, even if his heart had tried to. He turned to find Elizabeth standing in the doorway, staring at the bodies with a strange detachment. In her hand was a bottle of lamp oil. We need to go, she said calmly. But first, I want to leave Bishop a message of my own. Before Jack could stop her, she began splashing oil over the floor, the walls, the bodies. What are you doing? He demanded. The same thing they did to Thomas's body. Her voice was ice. They burned it so I couldn't bury him properly. So there'd be nothing left to mourn. Jack grabbed her wrist. This is my home. Elizabeth met his eyes, challenge flaring. And it's about to become your tomb if we stay. Bishop is coming with at least 9 more men. We can't fight them all. She was right, and Jack knew it. He released her wrist and began gathering supplies. Ammunition, food, his heavy winter coat, and extra blanket. Elizabeth struck a match and dropped it. The oil caught with a whoosh, flames racing across the floor. They ran outside as fire claimed the cabin Jack had called home for 7 years. I know a place, Jack said, leading her away as black smoke billowed against the gray sky. Old hunting shelter about 4 miles from here. If we hurry, we can reach it before the storm hits. As they fled through the forest, The sound of gunfire erupted behind them. Bishop's remaining men, arriving to find their companions dead and the cabin ablaze. "They'll follow our tracks in the snow," Elizabeth said between labored breaths. Jack nodded grimly. "I'm counting on it." He led them to a narrow creek where they walked in the icy water for half a mile, leaving no tracks. When they emerged, Jack used branches to sweep away their footprints for another quarter-mile. Standard Army counter-tracking technique. When they reached a massive fallen pine, Jack stopped. "Wait here," he said, handing Elizabeth the Winchester. "5 shots. If anyone comes, that isn't me." He disappeared into the trees, moving silently despite his size. 15 minutes later, he returned, a grim satisfaction in his eyes. "What did you do?" Elizabeth asked. "Left a welcoming gift," Jack replied. "Punji steaks covered in nightshade. Old Cherokee trick, ironically." His face darkened. "Anyone follows our trail is going to find himself gut-shot without a bullet being fired." A distant scream pierced the forest silence, followed by shouts of alarm. "That's one," Jack said flatly, leading Elizabeth onward through the deepening snow. An hour later, as the first heavy snowflakes began to fall, Jack led Elizabeth down a narrow ravine to the mouth of a cave hidden behind a stand of pines. Army used this as a forward scout position during the Arapaho campaigns, he explained, ushering her inside. "Most folks don't know it exists." The cave was small but defensible, with a narrow entrance and natural chimney that would draw smoke from a small fire without revealing their position. Jack quickly got a fire going, while Elizabeth arranged their meager supplies. "Bishop will keep coming," she said quietly. "He won't stop until I'm dead." "I know." Jack checked his Colt. 2 bullets left. Not enough. He pulled a small box from his pack, ammunition he'd grabbed before fleeing. "That's why we're going to kill him first." Elizabeth looked at him, a slow, cold smile spreading across her face. "I was hoping you'd say that." Outside, the snow fell harder, covering their tracks, buying them time. Inside, Jack Morgan cleaned his gun and prepared for war. 3 days of heavy snow kept them pinned in the cave. Jack used the time to plan, to prepare Elizabeth for what was coming. He taught her to shoot with his Winchester, surprised at how quickly she took to it. "My father insisted I learn," she explained, hitting her target, a knot on a distant pine, for the 3rd time. "One of the few useful things he gave me." When they weren't practicing, Jack told her about tracking, about reading the land and weather. She told him about Silverstone, about Bishop's operation, about the men who followed him. On the 4th day, the storm broke. The mountains gleamed white under a hard blue sky. "We move tonight," Jack decided, surveying the landscape. "Bishop will have men watching the trails to Silverstone, but they won't expect us to travel by night, not in this cold." "Why Silverstone?" Elizabeth asked. "That's Bishop's territory now." "Exactly. We need proof of what he's done. Proof that will turn the town against him." Jack's eyes narrowed. "You said your father keeps correspondence. Would he have kept letters from Bishop?" Elizabeth nodded slowly. "In his study, he keeps everything, especially anything that might be useful later." "And the doctor who treated your wounds after the whipping? Would he testify to what was done to you?" "Doc Cooper? Maybe." Elizabeth frowned. "He's a drunk these days, but he was kind to me. Tried to help when he could." Jack nodded. A plan was forming. Dangerous, probably suicidal, but a plan nonetheless. They set out as dusk fell, traveling light and fast. Jack led them down hidden game trails, avoiding the main paths where Bishop's men would be watching. The cold was bitter, seeping through their clothes, but they pushed on without complaint. By midnight, they'd covered nearly 10 miles. Jack called a brief halt, sharing jerky and water. "Once we reach Silverstone, we split up," he instructed. "You find Doc Cooper. I'll get into your father's house. Find those letters." Elizabeth shook her head firmly. My father's study has a lock only he has the key to. You need me to get in. Jack started to argue, then stopped. She was right. Fine, but you stay hidden until we reach the house. If Bishop's men see you, I know what they'll do, she said grimly. I've already felt Bishop's hospitality once. I don't intend to accept it again. They continued through the night, the temperature dropping until their breath hung in clouds before them. Near dawn, they approached a ridge overlooking the trail to Silverstone. Jack suddenly raised his hand, signaling Elizabeth to stop. He dropped to his stomach, crawling forward to the ridge edge. Elizabeth followed his example. Below them, two riders moved slowly along the trail, rifles across their laps. Bishop's men patrolling. Jack turned to Elizabeth, putting a finger to his lips, then pointed to a large boulder 20 yards away. She nodded, understanding. They needed to get past the patrol without being seen. They began crawling through the snow, keeping low. They were halfway to the boulder when one of the horses below nickered, sensing their presence. What's that? One of the riders called, reining in his horse. Probably just a deer, his companion replied. But both men were now scanning the ridge. Jack and Elizabeth froze, hardly daring to breathe. The snow had stopped, and the moon cast enough light to make movement visible. I'm going to check it out, the first rider said, dismounting. Jack made a quick decision. He reached slowly into his coat, pulling out his hunting knife. Stay here, he whispered to Elizabeth. Don't move until I signal. Before she could protest, he was gone, sliding down the backside of the ridge, moving in a wide arc to come up behind the patrolman. The first man was already climbing the ridge, rifle ready. The second remained on horseback, watching the trail. Elizabeth held her breath as the man approached, his boots crunching in the snow just yards from where she lay hidden. He paused, scanning the area, then took another step forward. Suddenly, a whistle came from the trees beyond the trail, a perfect imitation of a night bird. The patrolman turned toward the sound. Jim, that you? He called. The only answer was the soft thud of a body hitting the ground as Jack emerged from behind the second rider, lowering him silently to the snow, knife wet with blood. The first patrolman realized too late what was happening. He swung his rifle toward Jack, but the mountain man was already moving. Jack closed the distance in 3 strides, driving his knife up under the man's ribs before he could fire. The West doesn't belong to men like Bishop anymore, Jack whispered as the light faded from the man's eyes. Elizabeth watched in stunned silence as Jack efficiently stripped the bodies of ammunition and supplies, then concealed them in the underbrush. We'll take their horses, he said when he returned to her side. Cut our travel time in half. She nodded, still processing the cold efficiency with which he dispatched the 2 men. This wasn't just a skilled hunter. This was a killer who knew exactly what he was doing. Have you done this before? She asked as they mounted the horses. Jack's eyes were hard in the moonlight. I spent 2 years hunting the men who killed my family. Yes, I've done this before. They rode in silence after that, pushing the horses as hard as they dared in the deep snow. As the eastern sky began to lighten, they crested a final hill, and there below them lay Silverstone, a cluster of buildings dark against the snow, smoke rising from a few early morning chimneys. We'll approach from the north, Jack decided, less chance of being seen. As the sky lightened to pale gray, they made their way down to the town's edge. Here the houses were smaller, more modest than the grand homes at Silverstone Center. Jack led them through backyards and alleyways, keeping to shadows, avoiding the few people already moving about. They were passing behind the livery stable when a voice rang out. That's far enough. Jack spun, shoving Elizabeth behind him, the Colt appearing in his hand. A man stepped from the stable doorway, rifle aimed steadily at Jack's chest. He was older, maybe 60, with a gray beard and bloodshot eyes. His hands trembled slightly, but the rifle didn't waver. Doc Cooper? Elizabeth called from behind Jack. The man's eyes widened in shock. Elizabeth, God almighty, girl, they said you were dead. Not for lack of trying, she said, stepping around Jack. Cooper lowered his rifle, staring at Elizabeth like he was seeing a ghost. Bishop's men have been crowing about how they strung you up on Devil's Peak. Said the coal would finish you if the rope didn't. They were wrong, Jack said flatly. Now, either shoot us or help us, Doc. We don't have time for reunions. Cooper studied Jack, recognition dawning. You're Morgan, Jack Morgan. Thought you were dead too. Not yet. Cooper nodded slowly, decision made. Come inside, both of you, quickly before someone sees. Inside the stable's back room, warm with the heat of nearby horses, Cooper poured them both whiskey from a flask. His hands shook badly now, withdrawal evident in every movement. Bishop owns this town now, he explained, voice low. Your father's still alive, Elizabeth. But he's a puppet. Bishop threatened to reveal his dealings with the railroad, illegal land seizures, bribes, the works. Your disappearance was the final straw. Samuel folded like wet paper. We need proof, Jack said. Letters, documents showing what Bishop's done. And we need your testimony about Elizabeth's condition after she was whipped. Cooper laughed bitterly. My testimony? I'm a broken-down drunk, Morgan. Who'd believe me? Show them, Elizabeth said quietly. Cooper hesitated, then rolled up his sleeve. A brand marked his forearm, the same word that had been burned into Jack's door. Traitor. Bishop does this to anyone who opposes him, Cooper explained. He spoke up after what they did to you, Elizabeth. Said it was inhuman. Next night, 4 of his boys held me down while he heated the iron himself. Jack's jaw tightened. All the more reason to end this. Cooper nodded grimly. Samuel keeps his correspondence in a hidden safe behind the painting in his study. The combination is Elizabeth's birthday. Elizabeth looked surprised. How do you know that? Because I helped him install it years ago, when your mother was still alive. Cooper's eyes softened. He wasn't always the man he is now, Elizabeth. A noise outside, men's voices approaching, cut their conversation short. Back door, Cooper hissed, pointing. I'll distract them. Jack and Elizabeth slipped out as Cooper stumbled into the main stable area, bottle in hand, singing loudly and off-key. A perfect drunk act to draw attention. Moving carefully from building to building, they made their way toward the Reed mansion on the hill overlooking Silverstone. The grand house stood silent in the morning light, no sign of movement within. Father will be at the cattle office until noon, Elizabeth whispered as they approached the kitchen door. The staff has Thursdays off. Jack tried the door. Locked. With practiced ease, he pulled a thin metal pick from his boot and had the door open in seconds. Elizabeth raised an eyebrow. Army taught me more than shooting, Jack explained with the ghost of a smile. They moved silently through the house, Elizabeth leading the way to her father's study. The room was exactly as Cooper had described. Dark wood paneling, leather chairs, a massive desk, and on the far wall, a large painting of a mountain landscape. Elizabeth moved the painting aside, revealing a small wall safe. Her fingers spun the dial, 52258. The safe clicked open. Inside was a stack of letters, ledgers, and a small leather pouch. Elizabeth grabbed the letters, quickly sorting through them. Here, she said, pulling out several pages. These are from Bishop. Look at this one. Jack took the letter she offered, scanning the contents. It was exactly what they needed. Bishop outlining his plans to cleanse the territory, demanding Reed's financial support, threatening exposure of Reed's own crimes if he didn't comply. Most damning of all, a direct reference to handling Elizabeth as an example to others. The sound of the front door opening froze them both. Father's home early, Elizabeth whispered, panic edging her voice. Jack moved to the study door, peering out. Not Samuel Reed, but two of Bishop's men, moving through the house, checking rooms. Back way out? Jack asked urgently. Elizabeth nodded, pointing to a side door. Through the conservatory. They had just reached the glass-walled conservatory when a shout went up. They'd been spotted. Jack pushed Elizabeth ahead of him as bullets shattered glass around them. They crashed through the conservatory door into the garden beyond, running hard for the cover of a decorative hedge. Jack spun, Colt raised, and fired twice. One of Bishop's men fell, the other dove for cover. Jack grabbed Elizabeth's arm and they ran, bullets kicking up snow around their feet. They sprinted down the hill toward town, the element of surprise now lost. Their only hope was to reach the sheriff's office before Bishop's men caught them. But as they reached the main street, Jack saw with sinking heart that a group of riders was approaching from the east. Bishop himself, with at least 6 men. This way, Elizabeth tugged his arm, pulling him down a narrow alley. They emerged near the town's small church. The door stood open, and they rushed inside, hoping for sanctuary. Instead, they found themselves staring into the barrel of a shotgun held by a thin man in a preacher's collar. "That's far enough," the preacher said, voice surprisingly steady. "I know who you are." Jack tensed, ready to fight, when Elizabeth stepped forward. "Reverend Martin, it's me, Elizabeth Reed." The preacher's eyes widened, but the shotgun didn't lower. "They said you were dead, that you shamed yourself with a Cherokee and got what you deserved. Is that what Christ teaches, Reverend?" Elizabeth asked, her voice cutting. "That love deserves torture and death?" The preacher flinched as if struck. Outside, they could hear Bishop's men shouting, searching nearby buildings. "Please," Elizabeth said softly, "if you ever truly believed in justice, help us now." For a long moment, the preacher stood frozen. Then slowly, he lowered the shotgun. "There's a cellar beneath the pulpit," he said, moving the altar rug to reveal a trapdoor. "Storage for communion wine. It's small, but it will hide you." They climbed down into the musty darkness as the preacher replaced the rug and altar. Moments later, they heard boots on the church floor above. "Seen a man and woman, Reverend?" Bishop's voice, smooth as oil but sharp as a blade. "No one here but me, Mr. Bishop. Just preparing Sunday's sermon. Mind if we look around?" "God's house is open to all, Mr. Bishop, even those who come with guns rather than prayers." Jack held his breath, Colt ready. If Bishop found them here, the preacher would die too. They heard footsteps moving above, checking pews, opening doors, then finally retreating. "Keep your eyes open, Reverend," Bishop said as he left. "Those two are dangerous. The woman's lost her mind, and Morgan's a killer from way back." "I'll pray for their souls," the preacher replied, voice neutral. Minutes stretched into an hour before the trap door finally opened again. The preacher's face appeared, pale in the dim light. "They've set up checkpoints at every road," he reported. "Bishop's offering $50 for information. The whole town's looking for you now." Jack climbed out, helping Elizabeth up after him. "We need to get to the sheriff," he said. "We have proof of Bishop's crimes." The preacher laughed bitterly. "Sheriff Davis is in Bishop's pocket. Has been for months. You go to him, you're signing your death warrant." "Then who?" Elizabeth asked, desperation creeping into her voice. "Who in this town still has a spine?" The preacher considered for a moment. "Judge Harmon. He's old, stubborn as a mule, and the only man Bishop hasn't been able to buy or scare. His house is at the end of Pine Street." Jack nodded. "Thank you, Reverend." "Don't thank me yet," the preacher said grimly. "I'll create a distraction to draw some of Bishop's men away. But getting across town to Harmon's won't be easy." "Nothing worth doing ever is," Jack replied. The preacher was as good as his word. When they slipped out the church's back door, they could see a commotion at the far end of town. The church bell ringing frantically, men running toward it. Shouts of "Fire!" echoing in the cold air. Now, Jack urged, and they ran, keeping to shadows, moving from building to building toward Pine Street. They were halfway there when gunfire erupted behind them. Two of Bishop's men had spotted them and were giving chase. Jack shoved Elizabeth into a narrow space between buildings as bullets splintered wood beside them. "Keep going," he ordered. "Get to the judge. I'll hold them here." "Jack, go!" He pushed her onward, then turned, Colt raised. The first man rounded the corner, firing wildly. Jack waited, let him get closer, then squeezed the trigger. The man dropped without a sound. The second was more cautious, firing from cover. Jack waited, conserving ammunition, watching for his chance. When the man leaned out to fire again, Jack was ready. His shot caught the man in the shoulder, spinning him into the open. Jack's second bullet ensured he wouldn't get up again. Reloading quickly, Jack followed after Elizabeth, catching up to her at the end of Pine Street. Judge Harmon's house stood before them, a modest two-story home with a small porch. No lights showed in the windows. "Looks empty," Elizabeth whispered. Before Jack could respond, the front door opened. An elderly man stepped out, shotgun cradled in his arms. "That's close enough," he called. "State your business." "Judge Harmon." Elizabeth stepped forward, hands raised to show she was unarmed. "I'm Elizabeth Reed. This is Jack Morgan. We need your help." The old judge squinted at them. "Elizabeth Reed is dead, or so they say." "They lied," she replied, "just as they've lied about many things. We have proof, Judge, proof of what Nathaniel Bishop has done. To me, to this town, to many innocent people." Harmon studied them for a long moment, then stepped back, gesturing them inside with his shotgun. "Let's see this proof, then." Inside, by lamplight, they spread the letters on the judge's kitchen table. Harmon read them carefully, his weathered face growing darker with each page. "This is damning," he admitted finally. "But Bishop has powerful friends now. It would take more than letters to bring him down. Will this help?" Elizabeth slowly turned, unbuttoning the back of her dress to reveal the lattice of whip scars and burns across her pale skin. "Bishop did this himself in the town square, while his men held me down and half the town watched." The judge's face drained of color. "My God, there's more," Jack added. "Bishop led a raid on a settlement near the border 8 years ago. Killed 26 people, including women and children, my wife and son among them." Harmon's eyes sharpened. "You have proof of this?" "Dr. William Cooper was the field surgeon attached to Bishop's militia unit. He witnessed the raid, treated the few survivors. He'll testify." The judge paced the kitchen, thinking, if Cooper will testify publicly and with these letters, yes, I could issue a warrant, but executing it would be another matter. Bishop has at least 20 armed men at his command. A commotion outside interrupted them. Horses approaching fast, men shouting. They'd been found. "Back door," Harmon ordered, grabbing his shotgun. "I'll hold them off. Get to the town hall. Mayor Wilson is hosting a cattle association meeting today. All the territory's important men will be there. Make your case publicly, where Bishop can't silence you." Jack hesitated. "You're a brave man, Judge." Harmon snorted. "I'm an old man with nothing left to lose. Now go." They slipped out the back as gunfire erupted at the front of the house. Jack led them through back gardens and alleys, working their way toward the center of town where the town hall stood. A 2-story brick building with white columns, the grandest structure in Silverstone. As they approached, they could see the meeting was already underway. Through the windows, they glimpsed a crowd of men in suits and ranching clothes, listening to a speaker at a podium. "Side entrance," Elizabeth suggested, leading Jack around to a smaller door used by kitchen staff for events. They slipped inside, finding themselves in a hallway beside the main meeting room. Through the partially open door, Jack could see Bishop himself standing at the podium, addressing the crowd. "Must stand together against threats to our way of life," Bishop was saying, his voice smooth and persuasive. The recent unpleasantness with the Reed girl was regrettable, but necessary. We cannot allow our women to be corrupted by lies. Elizabeth's voice rang out as she pushed through the door, Jack right behind her. Every word from your mouth is poison, Nathaniel Bishop. The room erupted in shocked murmurs as Elizabeth strode down the center aisle, Jack flanking her, his hand near his Colt. Bishop recovered quickly, his handsome face twisting into a mask of concern. Miss Reed, we thought you were dead. Thank God you've... Save it, she snapped, reaching the front of the hall. She faced the crowd, many of whom she'd known all her life. This man had me whipped in the town square for the crime of falling in love. He murdered Thomas Grey Wolf in cold blood. He has terrorized this town, branded those who opposed him, and committed atrocities in the name of protection. Bishop's face darkened. This woman is clearly deranged, gentlemen. The trauma of her association with that Cherokee dog has... I have proof, Elizabeth interrupted, pulling the letters from inside her coat. Letters in Bishop's own hand, detailing his plans, his threats, his crimes. She handed them to Mayor Wilson, a portly man whose face grew increasingly pale as he skimmed the contents. These are serious allegations, Wilson stammered. More than allegations, Jack stepped forward. I am Lieutenant Jack Morgan, formerly of the 8th Cavalry. 8 years ago, Bishop led a raid on a peaceful settlement near the border. 26 dead, including my wife and child. Morgan is a deserter and a murderer, Bishop snarled, his mask of civility slipping. He's killed 2 of my men today alone. In self-defense, Jack replied evenly, after they tried to kill us for bringing the truth to light. A commotion at the back of the hall drew all eyes. Doc Cooper stumbled in, supported by Reverend Martin. The doctor's face was bruised, one eye swollen shut, but he stood as straight as his trembling legs would allow. I can confirm Morgan's story, Cooper called, voice raspy but clear. I was field surgeon under Bishop's command. I saw what he did. I treated Elizabeth Reed after her public whipping, and I bear his brand for speaking out. He thrust out his arm, showing the cruel scar. The mood in the room shifted. Men who'd been uncertain now looked at Bishop with suspicion and growing anger. Bishop sensed the change. His hand moved toward his gun. Gentlemen, he said, voice hardening, these people are dangerous criminals spreading lies to undermine everything we've built here. If you're too weak to see that... The doors at the back of the hall burst open again. Bishop's remaining men poured in, guns drawn. Kill them all, Bishop shouted, drawing his own revolver. Chaos erupted. Men dove for cover as gunfire filled the hall. Jack shoved Elizabeth behind a heavy oak table, drawing his Colt in one smooth motion. Bishop fired at Jack, the bullet splintering wood inches from his head. Jack returned fire, forcing Bishop to duck behind the podium. Across the room, several of the cattlemen had drawn their own weapons, firing at Bishop's men. Stay down, Jack ordered Elizabeth, then rolled to a new position, firing twice more. One of Bishop's men fell. Another returned fire, the bullet grazing Jack's shoulder. Jack ignored the pain, took careful aim, and put a bullet through the man's chest. Through the smoke and confusion, Jack saw Bishop making for a side door, using his men as cover. He's running, Jack shouted, pushing through the chaos to follow. Outside, Bishop was already mounting a horse. Jack fired, but missed as the horse reared. Bishop wheeled the animal around and galloped away, heading for the edge of town. Jack grabbed the reins of another horse tied nearby, swung into the saddle, and gave chase. Behind him, he could hear Elizabeth calling his name, but he didn't stop. This ended today. The 2 men thundered through Silverstone streets, Bishop leading Jack toward the open country beyond. Once clear of buildings, Bishop turned in his saddle, firing back at Jack. The bullet whistled past, too close for comfort. Jack urged his horse faster, slowly gaining ground. When he was within 30 yards, he raised his colt, aimed carefully, and squeezed the trigger. Bishop's horse screamed, hit in the flank. It stumbled, throwing Bishop clear before recovering and bolting away. Bishop rolled to his feet, gun still in hand, as Jack reined in his mount and dismounted. They faced each other across 20 feet of blood-stained snow. "It's over, Bishop," Jack said. Colt leveled. Bishop sneered. "Nothing's over, Morgan. Men like me are the future of this territory. Men like you are relics, too weak to do what needs doing. Murdering women and children? Torturing innocent people? That's not strength, Bishop. It's cowardice," says the man who ran away to the mountains rather than face the world. Bishop's smile was cruel. "How long did your wife scream, Morgan? Did she beg for mercy before I put a bullet in her?" Rage flared in Jack's chest, hot and deadly. His finger tightened on the trigger. "Don't do it, Jack," Elizabeth's voice. She'd followed them, was now approaching slowly from behind Jack, Winchester in her hands. "He wants you to shoot him in anger," she continued, eyes fixed on Bishop. "To become what he is. Don't give him that satisfaction." Bishop laughed. "Listen to your whore, Morgan. Lower your gun like a good—" Bishop's hand moved fast as a snake, raising his revolver. Two shots rang out almost simultaneously. Jack felt the burn as Bishop's bullet grazed his side. But his own shot was true, catching Bishop in the chest. The man staggered backward, shock replacing the sneer on his face. "You," Bishop gasped, blood bubbling at his lips. Jack advanced slowly, his Colt still trained on Bishop's chest. "That was for Sarah," he said coldly, "and Thomas, and for every innocent life you've taken." Bishop sank to his knees, gun falling from nerveless fingers. For a moment he knelt there, swaying, eyes already glazing. Then he reached inside his coat with his remaining strength, pulling out not another weapon, but a folded paper. "The governor," he wheezed, blood staining the document as he held it up. "Signed order to clear the territories. I was just following orders." Jack took the paper, scanning it quickly. It was genuine, a government directive authorizing Bishop to secure the border regions by any means necessary. "The men who gave this to you," Jack said, crumpling the paper, "they'll find someone else to do their dirty work. But you won't be hurting anyone else." "The West doesn't belong to men like you anymore," Jack said, his voice like iron as he stood over Bishop's dying form. Bishop toppled forward into the snow, which began to stain red beneath him. His hand clutched at something around his neck, a silver medallion on a chain. As he died, his fingers relaxed, and Jack saw what it was. A U.S. Marshal's badge, unofficial but unmistakable. Elizabeth moved to Jack's side, lowering the Winchester she'd been prepared to use if needed. "It's over," she said softly. Jack nodded, holstering his Colt. "It's over." They returned to Silverstone to find the battle there had ended as well. 3 of Bishop's men were dead, the rest captured or fled. Judge Harmon had survived the attack on his home and was already organizing a proper legal proceeding to deal with the aftermath. Elizabeth's father, confronted with his daughter alive and the evidence of his complicity with Bishop, broke down completely. By nightfall, he'd signed a full confession, transferring control of his property to Elizabeth and agreeing to leave the territory forever. Doc Cooper, his testimony now heard by the most influential men in the region, found himself suddenly respected again. Mayor Wilson, eager to distance himself from Bishop, offered Cooper his old position as town doctor back, with a substantial salary. As for Jack and Elizabeth, they declined offers to stay in Silverstone. The town held too many painful memories for both of them. "What will you do now?" Reverend Martin asked them as they prepared to leave the following morning. Jack looked at Elizabeth, who answered for both of them. We're going to rebuild, not here, but somewhere new, somewhere people can start fresh, regardless of who they are or where they came from. The preacher nodded. God go with you then. Jack mounted his horse, then reached down to help Elizabeth up behind him. As they rode out of Silverstone, the winter sun breaking through clouds to shine on new-fallen snow, Jack realized something he hadn't felt in years: purpose. 3 months later, the cabin on Elk Ridge was complete. Larger than Jack's old place, with 2 bedrooms, a proper kitchen, and windows that caught the morning sun. They'd built it together, log by log, Jack teaching Elizabeth the skills he learned over his years on the mountain. Word had spread somehow about what had happened in Silverstone, about Bishop's defeat, about the mountain man and the woman who'd brought him down. And slowly people began to find their way to Elk Ridge. First came a young couple, he white, she Arapaho, looking for somewhere their coming child could be raised without shame. Then a former slave from Georgia, heading west with dreams of land of his own. A Chinese man who'd laid railroad tracks across the territory until injury had left him unwelcome in the work camps. Jack welcomed them all, helping them build their own cabins nearby, teaching them how to survive the mountain winters. Elizabeth used her inheritance to buy supplies, tools, seed for planting. Together they created something neither had thought possible again: community. On a warm evening in late spring, Jack stood on the porch of their cabin, watching the sun set behind distant peaks. Elizabeth joined him, leaning against the railing beside him. "Are you happy, Jack?" she asked quietly. He considered the question seriously. Happy wasn't a word that had applied to him for many years. But now, "I'm at peace," he said finally. "That's more than I ever thought I'd have again." She nodded, understanding. Neither of them were the same people they'd been before Bishop entered their lives. The scars remained, inside and out. But they'd built something meaningful from the wreckage. "Do you ever think about going back?" she asked. "To Silverstone, I mean, now that things have changed there." Jack shook his head. "My past is there. My future is here." He looked at her directly. "With you, if that's what you want." Elizabeth smiled, the first full, genuine smile he'd seen from her. "It is," she said simply. They didn't marry in a church with witnesses. They didn't need papers or ceremony to confirm what they already knew. That night, under a sky blazing with stars, they made their own vows: to stand together, to protect what they'd built, to honor the memory of those they'd lost by living fully in their name. In the heart of a land carved by wind and snow, 2 souls broken by hatred and violence found something neither had dared hope for again. Not just survival, but purpose. Not just memory, but a reason to stay. Jack and Elizabeth were never celebrated in history books or newspaper headlines. But their story lived on in the community they built on Elk Ridge, a place where a man was judged by his character, not his color, where a woman's worth wasn't determined by whose arm she took, where the weak found strength and the lost found home. And in a territory still raw with the violence of conquest and the pain of division, they created something rare and precious: hope. 1 month after they settled on Elk Ridge, a package arrived by courier. Inside was Bishop's silver medallion and a note from Judge Harmon. Found among Bishop's effects, "There are powerful men in Washington who want this back, and the silence that comes with it. I thought you should decide what happens next. The battle you fought may have been just the beginning." Jack hung the medallion on a nail by the door, a reminder that vigilance was the price of freedom. And on quiet nights when the wind whispered through the pines, Jack Morgan would stand on his porch, Colt on his hip, watching the trail that led up from the valley below, ready for whatever might come next. Because some wars don't end with a single victory, and some men are born to stand on the frontier between civilization and chaos. Thank you for watching this story on Wild West Chronicles. Stories of honor and justice, where true courage still rides through the dust and silence of the frontier. If this tale moved you, if it made you believe in second chances and the power of standing against injustice, subscribe to our channel for more authentic stories of the American West. And join us next week when we follow the trail of the Silver Marshal, a man connected to Bishop who continues his work on the new frontier. Because out here, every legend leaves a trail,